Taking a pee, part 5. I'm still using the shape and design of the letter P to have more fun with my pens. These sort of look like a cross between a spermatozoa and a medusa. What do you call them? Jellyfish. And this is the spermatozoa, jellyfish, and pine bough, put together. These, I don't know what these are, but I was listening to the news and it was making me angry and angular. More curvy, jellyfishy stuff. This sort of has this brainstem kind of thing going on. Just very delicate line work with using a very, very fine Eversharp Skyline pen. Oh, here's my name in some sort of chaotic font. Another brainstem spermatozoa sort of a thing, jellyfishy thing going on. And another one with a little bit of cross-hatching. So this paper I'm using, by the way, came from the Magic Trunk. Yes, you heard me correctly, the Magic Trunk. The Magic Trunk is magical, and it exists in Somerville, my very city that I'm in. What it is a store called Paperworks, and it sells envelopes and stationery, and in various colors. It's sort of like Paper Source, for those of you that know Paper Source, but it's a little less artsy than that. It's the love child of Paper Source and Staples. If they had a child, it would be this place. The paper selection is relatively straightforward. It has some colors, some sizes, some envelopes in various sizes. It doesn't have really textured paper. It has, all their paper is relatively smooth. Sometimes you can get it a little thicker than others, but it's pretty straightforward in a good way. But what they do have is the Magic Trunk, and it's a steamer trunk that they have on the floor, and you can fill a bag of paper for $5. And these are generally paper scraps that are too small for them to use, or maybe the paper run, they're sort of at the end of a box of thousands of sheets of paper, and they have like maybe 300 sheets, and that's too few to put in another box, so they just cut it up and make it into these Magic Trunk things. So I go there and I fill up bags of paper for $5 and come home, and this is the paper. When you see me using smaller sheets of paper, that's what I'm using, the Magic Trunk paper. Almost all of it is really smooth, nice paper. Some of it has the slight sheen, metallic specks that are in the paper, which makes it sparkle to a degree. And whenever I use that, I always think I'm taking some of the iridium off my nib. And why am I not on camera? There we go. So, sorry, my camera was drooping. So, as much as I like that paper, I feel that I should maybe use smoother stuff. So I got lots of paper, cardstock that's this vanilla color, and that's what I'm drawing my peas on right now. I'm taking a pea and I'm playing with it. Sounds like I'm into water sports there. Oh yeah, I like to play with my pea. No, that's not what I'm doing. I'm playing with a pea. I'm taking a pea and I am turning it into fun shapes. Mainly just to play with a pen. I'm playing with a pen is what I'm doing. I did get recently these two pens recently on eBay, and this one I particularly liked because in addition to it being engraved here with initials, it's also engraved at the bottom, which I thought was quite nice with a date. I can't remember what nib. I think the nib that was in it is now in this pen that I got on eBay. This one looked like it had a really, really nice nib, and I bought this pen with this nib in it, and I did a switcheroo. And I switched them because it wasn't working well in the pen, and sometimes these nib and feed things get out of line or something, and you have to make them work by tweaking and pushing in a little further or pulling out a little further, or in some cases swapping, putting this nib in this pen and this nib in that pen is all you need to do. They're both Wall number 3 nibs. Initially I thought that the number 3 nib was too big for this pen because what was happening was the tines kept on doing that, which meant that the curvature of the nib as it was shoved into the pen was sort of torquing the pen in a way. So by switching them, I think I fixed the problem, but there's still some work that needs to be done. These Wall pens are from the 20s, and so they're nearly 100 years old and they're working fine. And look what I found. I bought this pen, but I had the matching pencil for it in my own little collection. So now I've got a set. I got both of them. And pencils are items that many collectors don't like, but I like them. Sometimes I enjoy using a pencil. So this nib was the one that came on this pen, and by switching it, I think I fixed the problem because it's not torquing in the way that it was. Nib tweaking is really it's really a lot of hit or miss, and sometimes I might find that it writes absolutely perfectly, but it looks a little wonky. And you know me well enough now to know that the wonkiness of the way it looks doesn't bother me. For example, a nib could be, drawing sideways for you. You like the nib to be completely centered along this axis, but every once in a while you'll get a pen that for some crazy reason just writes better with it being a little bit off center, and the nib when it's on center, the two halves of the iridium at the end of the nib don't line up. But if you push the nib a little bit this way, then they line up. And yes, you can take the nib out, you can take the feed out, you can try a million different other orientations of these things, and you might make it look fine. But I'm an impatient person, so with pens that I own myself, if I'm able to write with it perfectly when it's slightly off true, like this one, I think this one might be just slightly off. You know, you can see, and I'll draw the bottom. The bottom of the feed is just a little tiny bit off center here. You know, the nib, even though the nib looks okay, looking straight down, it's sitting on the feed just a little bit incorrect, a little bit to the side. And, you know, maybe it's that here's the feed, let's say, here's this section, we're looking head on, and the feed, you know, is like this. And normally the end of the feed, you know, the top of the feed is here. It might be that the feed is put in slightly crooked to the nib, but here this is exactly what's happening. But sometimes what I'm trying to tell you is, every once in a while I get a pen that when I have everything lined up perfectly, it doesn't write. Something's wrong with it. So by tweaking, by twisting, by turning, by rotating, I'm able to get it at a very sweet spot. And the sweet spot sometimes doesn't look as good as it could. And yes, I can spend another 3 hours trying different feeds and trying different nibs and switching back and forth, and I will, you know, I can do that. I'm happy to do that. You know, for a pen that I'm going to be selling to you. But for a pen that I'm using myself, I can live with its quirkiness, you know. I'm happy if the pen writes sweetly. A friend of mine buys pens from me, and he, you know, I get it perfect for him, and he brings it home and he takes it completely apart, and he gets out his toothbrushes, well, not the toothbrushes he uses on his teeth, but he gets out his special pen toothbrushes, and he Q-tips, and he cleans every little speck of whatever existence is on that pen. He decontaminates it, not only of its pure germs, but of the germs of the centuries before, the century before. And then he puts it all back together. And that's perfectly fine. Except sometimes it ends up, something breaks because the continual, you know, tweaking and pulling and yanking and replacing, redoing the nib, there's always a chance of something being damaged or bending a little bit too much. And for me, again, for my own particular use, if I can make it work for me perfectly, I don't care what it looks like. It can be a little screwed up. I didn't mean to do this. This little design work I just added was not, this making it all black was not my intention, but now I have to make other things black to make it look like it was my intention. Sort of an Art Deco P. Damn it. This is sort of a arsenic and little lace curly QEP. The arsenic part is the angular part, which is that movie takes place in a Victorian house in Brooklyn, I think. Cary Grant is in it, and Peter Lorre, and Raymond Massey, and Edward Everett Horton, and it's about these little old ladies that poison little old men and bury them in their basement. And so the lacy bit is the curly Q stuff, and the angularity represents their Victorian house. Very nice nib. Buying pens on eBay or from another person that you don't get to meet with face to face is always a little bit of a gamble. You know, the nib might look really, really good, but you bring it home and you try it out and it's scratchy, and it's scratchy because the nib is chipped or something, or it looks like it's really going to be flexible and it ends up not being as flexible as you wanted it to be, or the fine isn't as fine, or whatever. But those are the breaks. You have to take your chances on eBay. This is another eBay purchase I got recently, and it too looked like it had a nice flexible nib, and it does. This is a good pen for drawing. It's nice and wet. I'm making a nice wet P right now. Part of its wetness is perhaps due to the fact that it's dirty water I'm using, not really ink. And as you can see, my dirty water is slightly bluish. Well, maybe you can't see it. I can see it. Really nice pen. Nice. Sometimes when I say wet, it's just really, it's putting out a lot of ink, and sometimes I really like that to happen. I'm never afraid that it's going to skip. I mean, a pen should never skip, but every once in a while I'm doing a drawing and I'm thinking, you know, I'm just going just a little tiny bit slower than the limit that this ink flow will allow. But this, when it's really wet like this, it seems like I don't have to worry about that. Every once in a while you do get a pen that where you're writing faster and broader than the flow of the ink through the channel. Generally, old fountain pens are great at that, but there are some where you are writing too fast or drawing too fast. So, but when a pen is really wet like this, I'm not worried. you might have to wait a longer time for the pen to ink to dry on the page. This is also very hard paper. Things, it's not soaking in very much. So, but it's a nice little Skyline pen with a nice rubbery nib, wet rubbery nib. Okay, why is this pen skipping on me? Are you out of ink? Yes, you're out of ink. I just dip this into water. I didn't refill it. Every once in a while I look at the 50 pens on my desk and I say, okay, I need to reduce the pens that I'm using, and I will use them. If I know what ink is in them, I'll empty the ink in the appropriate container, and then I'll draw with them until they run out, and then I'll retire them for the time being. Or I might look at them and I'll say, okay, now I can sell you. I've had my fun. It was great fun, but it was just one of those things. Yeah, I know. No, there's no need to cry. There's no, we went into this together. That was the plan. Remember, we said it wasn't going to be this wasn't going to be forever. And this is this is just for fun. And then I'll post it online and hopefully sell it to a artist or a calligrapher, depending on who you are. And then you can have the relationship. It's just sloppy seconds. Everyone has those. Sometimes sloppy seconds are good. And other times I will or more likely than not, if it's a pen I'm using, I'll just retire it, put it back in the drawer that it belongs in, and take it out 2 years later and redo that relationship. So here's the one I just was using. Rediscovering pens that you haven't used in a while is really it's a very enjoyable act. I get on a little kick when I do that. If I discover, let's say, a Parker Vacuumatic sitting on my desk, or if I have to fix a Vacuumatic for someone, then I get done repairing it, and now I'm sort of thinking, well, let me try out some of my vacs I haven't used in a while, and then I'll fill them up with ink and write with them and say, gee, this is really, really kind of neat. And it's not so much the nib that is making me revisit a pen. It's more the way the pen feels in the hand, the balance of the pen, the way the pen looks. Gee, I really love this striped plastic. I've forgotten how much fun it was. And then I'll get on a little Vacuumatic kick. Though I must say I haven't been on one of those in a long, long time. A couple of years. And then I'll go through a Parker 51 kick. Then most of the time I always have a 51 ready at hand to be used. But when I'm really on a kick, I will take my 51, and then I'll take another 51 and another 51, and I'll have 6 51s on my desk all filled, and enjoy the variety of the nibs that a 51 has. Okay, 2 P's. 2 P's or not to P. Okay, let's try one more. What pen will this be? It's another relatively new one to me. This is one that I've been liking. It's a very, very fine Schaefer Touchdown pen that really smooth. Turn it upside down and have this very, very fine line. Do this with one of your pens. Let me know if you can, make circles that big, that quickly, and that will still leave a line without skipping. You just try that out with your pens. That's a challenge. I should have offered that challenge, and no one have followed me up on that yet. Modern pens, especially people that use modern pens. Modern pens skip. Yeah, they do. Yes, they do. I'm drawing off cam again here. I mean to do that. This is sort of a P that's inspired by jellyfish, a spermatozoa, and the Gordian knot. This is just turning into this clusterfuck of interwoven shapes. I won an eBay pen last night. I'm very much looking forward to getting it in the mail. It has a big moppy nib. It looks like it will go through a gallon of ink, a day. And though I don't like that kind of a nib, I know that a lot of people will. But what I like about the pen, why I bought the pen, was it has an engraving on it. Yes, and you know that I like engravings. It's a pen and pencil set, and what I find interesting, and I'm the only person on the planet that would find this interesting. No one else would. So I'm the right person to get this pen, I think. It has a name on it, and the name I like, Mike McCool. Isn't that great? Cool is spelled with a K. Mike McCool. So that's perfect in itself. That's worth a couple of extra dollars in my book to have that name. It's almost like a name that you'd find in a cartoon or the character of a private eye played by a dog. My name is Mike McCool. Of course it is. But what I like about it, even better than that, is that Mike McCool is the name on the pen is a serif font, all capital letters, but some capital letters are bigger than others. And I think I remember correctly. Anyway, but the really fun thing, the thing that I really, really like, is the same name in the same font on the pencil barrel is italicized. So it's the same font but in italics. And it's sort of just funny, like, why would he choose that? Why would he make that be distinctly different in that way? Now, my thought is perhaps he, bought the pen and then later on went in and said, okay, I want the pencil now. I find I need to erase a lot of the things that I write. So I need to buy the pencil. Oh, and then write my name on the side. And he mistakenly told the engraver to make it in this font, and he pointed to the sample book and he pointed to the wrong one. I don't know. I can't get into his head, obviously. But it makes me smile. Mike McCool. See? It's an awful lot of craziness happening. There's not as much craziness happening down here, though, is there? That's okay. Craziness doesn't have to happen everywhere. God, 33 minutes and 26 seconds. And if you watched from the beginning to the end, you need to get a better life going for you. I'm talking to you. You're okay. You can watch me, but not you. You're young and you should be doing other things with your life than sitting in front of your YouTube screen. Bye.